Hey there, Alex here at mixinglessons.com. In this video, we're going to talk about bit depth. So when you set up a session, you'll often be given the option to select which bit depth you want to use. So what are you actually controlling when you select this bit depth? Well, the bit depth defines the amount of dynamic range that you'll be able to capture and reproduce. So that's the difference between the loudest and the quietest sounds that you'll be able to record and play back. And so at the upper end, you have a sort of a ceiling above which anything would clip if it tried to get louder than that point. And at the lower end of the dynamic range, you have what's called the noise floor. And that's a very low level signal, which is a combination of any unwanted noise or any unwanted sound, which is sort of inherent in audio systems. So at the upper limit of the dynamic range, you have that point where you can't go any further because things would clip. And at the lower end of the dynamic range, you have that point where anything that's quieter than this would be masked by the noise floor. So at 16-bit, you have 96 decibels between these 2 points. So you can capture a dynamic range of up to 96 dB. And at 24-bit, you have 144 decibels of dynamic range. You have 144 decibels between the noise floor and the upper limit. Now, at 16-bit, that 96 decibels of dynamic range is a really decent amount of dynamic range to work with, but a slightly more common practice is to record at 24-bit, and that's simply because it gives you that bit more dynamic range to work with. It means that you can record at slightly more conservative levels where you're not going anywhere near that level of clipping, but you're still well above the noise floor. Now, you might say, okay, well, what about 32-bit float? Well, very, very briefly, bit depth comes in 2 types. You have fixed point and floating point. So the 2 bit depths that we talked about so far, 16 and 24, we're talking about fixed point bit depths. Now, floating point bit depths use their dynamic range a little bit differently. They're generally concerned with the internal processing that goes on within your DAW. So floating point processing allows you to raise the levels of tracks quite freely without ever running into clipping, or to push the input and output of plugins up and down without running into clipping. And so you might say, okay, well, is it better to select 32-bit float? Well, personally, I don't think that that's necessary. The reason being, all of the modern DAWs that I'm aware of at least process audio internally at 32-bit floating point regardless of the bit depth of your actual audio files. And so you'll get the benefits of 32-bit floating point processing in your DAW, even if your audio files aren't 32-bit floating point files themselves. And so personally, I opt for 24-bit when I record. I hope you found this video helpful. If you've got any questions at all, please leave them in the comments. If you want to get a head start with producing music in your home studio, then head over to mixinglessons.com/free-downloads, and there you can download my 3 free PDF guides. There's an EQ cheat sheet, a compression cheat sheet, and a vocal recording guide that I think you'll find really useful. Thank you very much for watching. Please feel free to subscribe to the channel for my future videos, and I'll see you next time.